Hi, I'm Erica, and I'm here to show you how to use the free downloadable embroidery that works with the Go Pincushion Die. Now there are two great shapes that come on this fun project die, and they're both sewing themed. We've got a spool and a little sewing machine. You can use them both to decorate your pincushions. So you'll want to embroider your design onto the top piece of your pincushion before you start sewing it together. So I'm going to focus on just stitching out one of those shapes for you today in the video. Be sure to check out our other video on how to assemble your pincushion if you have any questions. So the first thing you'll want to do is download that free embroidery from AccuQuilt.com. Now be sure to log in to your account before you get started, and once you have it downloaded, you'll want to save the correct format so that you can save it to a flash drive and bring it to your embroidery machine. Now, if you have any questions on what format you need for your embroidery machine, be sure to check your machine manual or talk to your local machine dealer. Once that's ready, you'll want to lightly iron fusible onto the back of your fabric. Now, we're going to embroider the sewing machine today, and you'll see that it's a directional shape. So before you get started, you'll want to decide on which way you want your sewing machine facing, if you want it facing right or left. That will determine whether you cut it out with your fabric facing up or facing down. Now the next step will be to go ahead and get your stabilizer and some background fabric in your hoop. So we've got that already here, and we've got it all centered here, so we're gonna go ahead and get going. At this point, I can go ahead, I've got my hoop in my machine, and I'm ready to get started. Now when we start this, the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to stitch out a placement stitch for us. So let's take a look. Perfect. Okay, so we've got that ready to go. Now I'm going to slide this out real quick. Now we've got our placement shape for exactly where our shape is going to go. Now I already cut it out, so just take that paper fusible off, and it's going to fit just perfectly inside that shape. I've got my hoop off. I'm going to go ahead and use my wool cutting mat and tack this down really quickly around the edges, just so we don't have any issues with it slipping. Okay, so we've got that down. Now we can go ahead and put the hoop back on the machine, and the machine will go ahead and keep going now that we've got that in place. Now you've got a choice of 3 stitches for this embroidery. You've got a satin stitch, a blanket stitch, and a motif stitch. Now this is going to go ahead, go around and do a nice little zigzag to keep it in place. It'll go back then, and it's going to do our satin stitch on top of that stitch. Now once the embroidery's done, you can go ahead when you pull this off and you can embellish it. There's lots of different ways that you can go ahead and embellish and decorate these. We have some that we've added some buttons to. I even, you can do a little stitch there to make it look like a needle. Lots of different creative ideas for this. Our tack down stitch is right there. We're going ahead, it's going back, it's doing that nice tight satin stitch. So it's going to be just perfect, give you a great finished project look really simply and easily. Now, if you don't have an embroidery machine, that's okay. You can go ahead and do this with a raw edge applique by hand any way that you'd like to. Great, and now we've got our finished embroidered little sewing machine. Looks just like my featherweight, minus the polka dots. It's got a great satin stitch around it, easy to do. The die did the work on cutting it, your machine did the work on embroidering it. So we know you're going to have fun with these sewing shapes and find a lot of uses for them beyond just pincushions. And remember, at AccuQuilt, we want to help you cut time so you can quilt and embroider more.